When Amelia Robert woke up on the morning of her 10th wedding anniversary, she had no idea her marriage was already over. The first sign came not from her husband's mouth, but from a notification on her phone, a headline that should never have existed. Tech visionary Ethan Robert debuts glamorous new fiancé at gala. Fiancé. Amelia read the word 3 times, each one cutting deeper than the last. The attached photo was even worse. Ethan in a tuxedo, grinning for the cameras, his arm wrapped around her, a 20-something influencer named Nova Gray, who'd built a career out of being seen. Her breath caught. This wasn't gossip, this was confirmation. The rumors that had swirled for months, the sudden business trips, the distant tone, all of it had been leading here. He hadn't even told her himself. The coffee pot overflowed on the counter as she stood frozen. When she finally shut it off, her reflection in the darkened window startled her. She looked older than she remembered, not because of years, but because of disappointment. She had helped Ethan build everything: the company, the brand, the dream. She'd been there when his fame was just late nights in their cramped apartment, coding side by side. She had handled his press, his investors, the small details that no one noticed, but that made him shine. Now she was the ghost of the woman behind the success story. By noon, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, reporters, even her mother. She ignored them all. But one call she couldn't avoid: her lawyer. "Amelia, I've reviewed the filing. He's already submitted the divorce papers. He's citing irreconcilable differences." "Irreconcilable differences," she repeated bitterly. "That's what he calls trading me in for a publicity boost." He hesitated. "There's more. He's trying to claim sole ownership of Tech Dynamics." She felt her heart lurch. "That's our company. I co-founded it with him." "He's arguing that your contributions were advisory. You'll need to fight this." She hung up and sank into the nearest chair, her pulse hammering in her ears. For years she'd believed Ethan when he said, "We're partners." But somewhere along the way, he'd rewritten the story, one where only his name mattered. By the end of the day, the news was everywhere. Nova Gray, the visionary muse; Ethan Robert, the face of modern innovation; and Amelia, she was a footnote. She stayed off social media for weeks, but even in silence, the humiliation found her. The settlement was brutal. Ethan's lawyers were relentless, twisting every contract and clause, until she was left with little more than her dignity, and even that felt fractured. She walked out of the courtroom one cold March afternoon, the city wind tearing through her coat, and made herself a promise: "I will not disappear." For months she kept a low profile, consulting privately for startups that needed help refining their brand narratives. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was hers. Then, one afternoon, a young CEO named Jade Han reached out. "I've heard about you," Jade said over video call. "Word is, you built Tech Dynamics before Ethan became Ethan." Amelia smiled faintly. "Something like that. I'm launching a platform, Ethical AI Designs. But I need more than tech. I need a story. You're the best storyteller in the business." It was the first time anyone had said that to her in years. She accepted. Working with Jade felt like remembering herself. Long nights, creative debates, coffee-fueled brainstorming sessions. But this time, it wasn't about making someone else look brilliant. It was about building something true. Within months, their startup, Lumake, began to attract attention. Investors were intrigued by its transparency, its refusal to manipulate users for engagement. "It's not about algorithms controlling people," Amelia explained at a conference. "It's about people guiding technology toward humanity." The crowd erupted in applause. That clip, a simple 2-minute Q&A, went viral. Within a week, Amelia's name was trending, not as Ethan's ex-wife, but as Amelia Robert, the voice of ethical innovation. Meanwhile, Ethan's empire was beginning to crack. The partnership with Nova that had made headlines was turning sour under the spotlight. Their staged perfection had begun to feel contrived. Investors were asking hard questions, and innovation had stalled. At one press conference, a journalist asked Ethan about Lumic. He laughed dismissively. "They're idealists. We're the real thing." But in private, he watched Amelia's interviews with unease. She had something he'd lost: authenticity. The turning point came when the Global Tech Forum announced its keynote lineup for the year. To Ethan's shock, he wasn't headlining. Amelia was. The theme: reclaiming integrity in innovation. He tried to downplay it publicly, but the industry noticed. She'd become the face of what technology was supposed to be. When the day of the conference arrived, Amelia stood backstage, adjusting the microphone on her lapel. She could hear the buzz of thousands of attendees in the main hall. For a moment, nerves fluttered in her stomach, not from fear, but from the surrealness of it all. "Ms. Robert," the stage manager said, "you're up next." As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd rose in applause. The lights were blinding, but she felt calm. She began with her story, not as a victim, but as a creator who'd learned that vision means nothing without values. "When I helped build a company years ago," she said, her voice steady, "I thought success meant recognition, but I was wrong. Success is not applause. It's not headlines. It's the quiet certainty that what you build matters, even if no one knows your name." Cameras flashed. Some audience members teared up. Then, as she revealed Lumic's new project, a global collaboration platform for ethical creators, the applause thundered so loud she had to pause. Somewhere near the back of the room, Ethan sat among a cluster of executives. His face was unreadable. Amelia's eyes flicked to him once, just long enough to acknowledge the symmetry of it all. He had traded everything for the illusion of fame. She had built something real. After the keynote, journalists swarmed her. Headlines appeared within hours. Amelia Robert redefines tech leadership with humanity. From betrayed to beloved, the woman changing innovation. Investors flooded Lumic's inbox. Major publications requested interviews. For the first time, she wasn't standing behind someone else's success. She was the success. That night, she returned to her apartment, still small, still quiet, and stood by the window overlooking the skyline. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Ethan, congratulations on your speech. You've really become something." She stared at it for a long time before replying. "Amelia, I always was. You just never looked close enough." She blocked the number. Months passed, and her star only rose higher. She appeared on magazine covers, was invited to panels, even featured on a late-night talk show. But through it all, she stayed grounded. When a journalist asked her, "What would you say to the woman you were 3 years ago?" she smiled softly. "I'd tell her she's not defined by what someone took from her, but by what she creates next." The audience applauded, but Amelia wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking of the nights she'd cried into her pillow, of the mornings she'd forced herself to stand up anyway. That was the real victory. Then came the moment that brought everything full circle. The International Tech Awards Gala, the same event where Ethan had once introduced Nova to the world, invited Amelia to receive the Innovator of the Year honor. When she stepped onto the red carpet, cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters shouted her name, not his. Her elegant black gown shimmered under the lights, but it was her composure that stunned them. She carried herself like a woman who no longer needed validation. Inside, as she accepted her award, she spoke directly from the heart. "I once thought the world could take everything from me. My company, my love, my purpose. But you can't steal someone's integrity. You can't fake authenticity. And you can't trade truth for fame without eventually losing both. The room erupted in a standing ovation. Ethan, seated 2 rows from the front, lowered his gaze. Nova wasn't beside him anymore. Fame had been feeding. The spotlight he'd so desperately chased had moved on. After the ceremony, Amelia didn't stay for the after-party. She slipped out quietly, trophy in hand, and hailed a cab under the soft rain. The driver recognized her from the live stream. "You're that lady who won the big award, right? My wife watched your speech. She said it made her cry." Amelia smiled faintly. Then it was worth it. Back at her apartment, she placed the award on her shelf next to a